So I had studied journalism in school. I studied electronic media, but then when I got into journalism, I felt that I could do so much more. So I went into film. I went to the Mohammed Amin Institute, where I learned more about filmmaking. And so my career really started properly in film. So I'm an old school person. I worked in TPF, for those who remember what that is. I know a lot of young people don't know what that is, but I worked in TPF, and then I worked on a lot of TV shows from like Wash and Set and Sumula Pens, Eliza Bind, etc. And I really honed my skills in storytelling there. But when the digital boom kind of happened, I started getting a lot more into blogging, because there was all this space where anyone could become a storyteller, and there was no limit, there were no gatekeepers. So I started a blog, and then I started getting paid to write and to do reviews. So my journalistic instincts really came in hand in there. And then eventually I started doing a lot more training. And so right now I do a lot of work around internet governance and digital rights, because I feel like there's no point of saying that, the internet is here and we are all ready to use the internet, and young people can get on the internet, especially in Africa, but we are not making it safer for them, especially for women who face a lot of cyberbullying and other threats. We want to make the internet safer, and we want to give digital literacy to all the people, young and old, to make it like a better experience for all of us, so that we can all benefit from all the things that are on the internet. So basically I wear many hats, but a lot of it is still under storytelling, so media driven, and really trying to make sure that we're telling the stories, and that we have the platforms to tell the stories, and that we also have the ability and the safety to tell the stories. My parents are not journalists, and I think my mom is, actually they're both business people, so working a lot more like in construction and things like that. So I would say that me getting into journalism was because they thought I was going to be a lawyer, since people are always saying, you're so well spoken and smart, should have been a lawyer. Maybe, I could always go back to school and do law because I do a lot of policy work, but I would say that they've been very supportive of me, and also that sometimes when I talk about what I do on the internet, my mom literally just tells people she's not quite sure. She tells people, she does stuff on the internet, so she's not quite sure, about digital rights and things like that. But, that's why it's important to keep educating people. So what I loved about coming for this thing, and why I really wanted to come for this, so like I said, my platform is called Zeda, that's Zeda, and there's a lot of work that needs to go into building profitable media on the continent, because I know, even journalists know that traditional media is having a hard time right now. New media is also having a hard time right now, and so kind of trying to collaborate and figure out how do we create media that is profitable, that runs on its own, because also at the same time we don't want to just say that media is an NGO driven thing. People are consuming content constantly, and it means there's an audience for it, that there's money in it. But how do we make sure that we are balancing profitability and also creating stories that matter, that have an impact? And so that's why I'm kind of there, where I'm sort of charting the path to see how does that happen, how does that work. And so that's why I was glad to be here, because it's really great to meet people who are thinking the same things and having the same questions and trying to figure out the same things, like how do we get a solution to this problem, because it's a global problem. It's not just in Africa, it's not just in Kenya. But I'm excited to say that I've met a couple of people here that I think we're going to have further conversations, and I feel like we will eventually find a solution to this issue, and that we should not stop looking for an issue, because media matters, media is important, and we should keep at it. All the people who are storytellers and people in media, we should definitely keep at trying to tell the right stories.
Okay, what can you tell to young upcoming journalists?
I would say that it's definitely harder for young upcoming journalists, because like I said, the media, it's shrinking in terms of traditional media, shrinking, and the opportunities are not the same as they used to be. But I would encourage young journalists to get in there and look at new forms of media and see how they can have their stories heard. There are so many ways to do things now, whether it's using, like TikTok or Twitter or Instagram or, whatever it is, your blog. People are back to reading blogs, by the way. But don't be afraid to try things. Don't be afraid afraid to get your hands dirty, because at the end of the day, if you have a good story, that's all that matters. Tell your stories, tell them boldly, and hopefully, things will work out. But I really feel like Africa, when we look at media, we're so far away in terms of media and content that there's a huge opportunity there for the people who are willing to go boldly.
And about the mainstream media,
Yeah.
how can you say about the mainstream media?
I feel like the mainstream media should try and incorporate more new media. I know that it's hard, and I know like people are always fighting new media and saying that they are taking up the space for traditional media, and I understand why. And it's true that there's a lot of stuff that digital media and new media really does not, like the ethics of media, for example. Traditional media is able to really stick to the things that are important, and maybe digital media people are able to kind of like not necessarily follow the rules. But I would say that there is a place for traditional media, but I think that place needs to shift, because instead of focusing on breaking news, we're getting breaking news on social media. So we don't need traditional media to tell us about breaking news. What we need traditional media to do is to give us context. Because in as much as people say that they don't trust the media, they still will look to the traditional media for context, and because it's heavy hitting. So we need the traditional journalists to really focus on giving us the context so that we can have like a wider lens when it comes to viewing the news.
How do you see the future of digital media, social media? How do you see the future?
So I was at a conference, actually, the Mozilla Festival, the first ever conference, the first ever Mozilla Festival house in Africa, which is a big deal. They chose Nairobi. That was like last week. And a lot of the conversations are about AI. And I think that's the future. In as much as we are fighting it, it is the future. The only thing we need to focus on is ethical AI, responsible AI. So I feel like a lot of the future of media is going to be focus like really being driven by AI. But I also feel like something I've noticed is that a lot of people want authenticity. A lot of people want like trusted sources. And so that's why I feel like a lot of it is going from being broad and being more niche and more community driven. So I feel like instead of focusing on media that is like, okay, you're covering the entire country or the entire continent, you focus on different communities, different people who have different interests, and try to cater to those people. So instead of going wide, going deep. And I feel like that's the future, where people are more interested in that community kind of news, where the news is tailored to them.
Do you think that newspapers will end at some point in time?
Yes, I do think newspapers will end because one, the paper question, we are talking about climate change all the time, and so it might be an issue in terms of like paper. So a lot of that, I think newspapers will most likely go more digital rather than print, but I don't think that means that they're any less important. I think written content is still very important, and we shouldn't like count it out and say like, a lot of people are saying we should just focus on video. I don't think so. I think we have space for all the different kinds of ways to create content and to create news.
So, do you think that now with the coming of digital news and digital spaces, it opens up to unethical journalism or unprofessional journalism? Do you think we can look to be able to solve this?
I definitely think the question of unethical journalism or unethical, just basically being unethical because of being online, is going to be a conversation that's ongoing. I do speak a lot in spaces on internet governance, and that's an ongoing question. So it's not just users that can be unethical, or content creators that can be unethical. Even some of these platforms are basically making the platforms unethical because they're very focused on, the algorithms are focused on clicking. So if you're focused on just clicking, then it means that you keep showing content that is creating, some sort of virality, and a lot of that content is negative. So you're giving people an incentive to be negative, right? And so I think that question will constantly be there. But I am a very optimistic person. I do feel like the strength of the media, and also generally people do eventually, when it comes to the news, want authentic news. And so really being able to kind of figure out a way to sift out the negativity and the misinformation, misinformation, maybe a task, but I feel like people at the end of the day don't want to spend their day just consuming negativity. People still want to be able to get the news. They still want to get information, and I think that that's not going to stop.
What is the future of journalism?
The future of journalism? I think journalism will always exist. I think journalism has always been there in different formats. Because when you think about the cavemen, there was someone who was telling them stories. There was, whether it's, and that's why for me I find like such a conversation is amazing, because we're having conversations, and a lot of the conversations with journalism also tend to have storytelling as part of it. Humans have been telling stories since time immemorial. So journalism is a form of storytelling, but it's factual, right? It's factual storytelling. So, we talk about storytelling more as fiction, movies and books and stuff like that. But journalism is still a story. You're telling a story. So human beings will never not want a story told. And so the people who are able to figure out how to tell those stories in a way that the people of now and the people of the future can consume those stories will always have a place.